Welcome back to the deep dive. I don't know about you, but sometimes when we're doing these deep dives, I kind of wish we had a time machine.
Oh, yeah.
Especially for like today's topic, ancient Greece and the Peloponnesian War.
Oh, yeah.
It'd be amazing to just be a fly on the wall during those epic battles or those, political debates.
I know what you mean. It's fascinating to think about, you know, it wasn't just about military strength. It was, you had these two really dominant city-states,
Right.
Athens and Sparta, and they each represented such a distinct ideology and way of life. It was almost like a clash of civilizations.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at this stack of sources that we have here for this deep dive,
Okay.
and one name keeps popping up over and over again. Thucydides. He
Yeah.
wasn't just a historian, right?
No, not at all. He was actually an Athenian general who
Yeah.
fought in the Peloponnesian War. Can you imagine,
Yeah.
writing a history book while you're, dodging spears and, strategizing military campaigns?
Oh my God.
But that's what he did. And that firsthand account that he gives us is so valuable. It gives us a glimpse into the political maneuvering and just the realities of war in a way that we wouldn't get otherwise.
That he was like right there in the thick of it. It makes you wonder, did his experience as a general affect like how he wrote about the war at all?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can sense his frustration at times with some of the decisions that the Athenian leaders made.
Right.
His account's very analytical, and he doesn't shy away from criticizing his own side when he feels that they made mistakes.
That's so interesting. And going through these sources, I mean, one of the things that really struck me was Pericles' Funeral Oration. It's so powerful and eloquent even today.
It really is. Pericles was the leader of Athens at the start of the war, and his funeral oration, it's considered one of the greatest speeches ever delivered.
Wow.
I mean, it's not just a eulogy for the fallen soldiers, it's a celebration of Athenian democracy and a rallying cry to defend their way of life.
And he makes a really big point about the power of the people, right? Like he has this famous quote where he says, power is not held by a few, but by all the people. I mean, that just seems so forward thinking, especially for, that time period.
It does. But
Yeah.
it's also important to remember that Athenian democracy wasn't perfect.
Right.
It excluded women, slaves, foreigners.
Right.
So, while Pericles' words are inspiring, the reality was a little bit more complicated.
Yeah. It's a good reminder to always look beyond the surface
Right.
when you're studying history.
Yeah,
And to really think about the nuances of any historical period.
exactly.
But there's no denying the power of his words. Like his quote about the secret of happiness being freedom and the secret of freedom being courage.
Right.
I mean, that's something that I feel like people still really connect with even today.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, sadly, Pericles himself wouldn't live long enough to see how the war unfolded. Just a year later, Athens was struck by this devastating plague.
Yeah, this plague was a major turning point, wasn't it? I mean, it weakened Athens and really affected their morale.
And it also raises questions about Pericles' own strategy. His plan was to avoid direct conflict with Sparta's army, which was much larger,
Right.
by relying on Athens' naval power. So he encouraged citizens who were living outside the city walls to move inside to essentially create this, crowded, fortified island.
So he was like almost creating the perfect conditions for a plague to spread.
Exactly. Overcrowding and poor sanitation likely contributed to just how rapidly the disease spread.
Wow.
It's a good reminder that even the best laid plans can have unintended consequences.
That's for sure. So speaking of this period, we have to talk about Hippocrates.
Mm.
He was a contemporary of Thucydides,
He
right?
was. And our sources mention that he even played a role in trying to contain the plague.
Oh, wow.
Hippocrates is considered the father of medicine.
Right.
And for good reason. He completely revolutionized the way that people thought about disease. Back then, illness was often attributed to, the gods or supernatural forces.
Right.
But Hippocrates believed that diseases had natural causes, related to the environment, diet, lifestyle.
It's amazing that he recognized that connection, between our health and our surroundings. So what about that story of Hippocrates and the blacksmiths?
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was so interesting.
The story goes that he observed that blacksmiths seemed less affected by the plague than other people.
Okay.
So he theorized that the heat from their forges might actually be killing the disease.
Wow.
So he recommended lighting fires throughout Athens to try and combat the plague.
So did it work? Did the fires actually help?
It's hard to say for sure. The story might be more legend than fact.
Okay.
But what's important is that Hippocrates was using observation and reason
Right.
to try to understand and fight disease, which was really a radical shift in medical thinking at the time.
Yeah.
He was laying the foundation for a more scientific approach to medicine, and we still benefit from that today.
So after the plague and the death of Pericles, What happened next? Did the war just keep going?
It did. Cleon, a populist leader, he took over in Athens, and he was very much in favor of continuing the war against Sparta.
Even though Athens had been weakened by the plague.
Yes, even though they had been significantly weakened.
Wow.
But eventually there was a peace treaty.
Okay.
In 422 BCE, the Peace of Nicias was signed. It was intended to last for 50 years,
But there's always a but in history.
always a but. The problem was that neither Athens nor Sparta fully committed to the terms of the peace.
Oh, really?
They were both reluctant to return captured territories, and they continued to view each other with a lot of suspicion.
So it's more like a temporary truce.
Right.
I guess even back then, real peace was hard to come by.
It seems that way.
Yeah.
So did the war eventually start up again?
It did. And this is where a new and pretty controversial figure enters the picture, Alcibiades. He was an Athenian aristocrat known for his ambition and his charisma,
Oh, yes.
and he convinced the Athenian assembly to launch this expedition to Sicily,
Wow.
which would be a major turning point in the war.
That's a bold move. What was the thinking behind that?
Well, Alcibiades argued that conquering Sicily would give Athens control of these vital grain supplies and weaken Sparta's allies.
I see.
So he kind of painted this picture of Athenian dominance in the Mediterranean.
Right.
But a lot of people saw it as a really reckless gamble.
Yeah, and on the way to Sicily, something happened that really showcases the brutality of war.
You're talking about the conquest of Melos.
Yes.
So this was a neutral island that was on the route to Sicily.
Right. Athens demanded that Melos surrender and pay tribute, but the Melians refused. They wanted to stay neutral.
So that didn't go so well for them.
Tragically, no, Athens, after a long siege, they captured Melos.
Oh, wow.
They killed all the men and enslaved the women and children. It was a horrific act.
It's hard to reconcile that brutality with the ideals that Pericles talked about.
I know. And it's interesting because this event is actually documented in Thucydides' work as the Melian Dialogue.
Right.
And it's one of the most chilling passages in his entire history. It's basically a fictionalized conversation between Athenian envoys and the Melian leaders, where the Athenians justify their actions with this really chillingly pragmatic argument. The strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must.
Wow. That's a pretty stark view of power dynamics.
It is. And the Melian Dialogue has been interpreted as an early example of real politics.
Right.
The idea that power, not morality, dictates the course of international relations.
That's a really thought-provoking concept.
Yeah.
So on one hand, we have Athens, this beacon of democracy and philosophy, and on the other hand, they're engaging in this really brutal act of conquest. It's a complex and disturbing picture.
It really is. But there's also this unexpected connection to art that emerges from this tragedy.
Oh, really?
The island of Melos, where this horrific event took place, is also where one of the most famous statues in the world was discovered centuries later. The Venus de Milo.
Venus de Milo, you mean like the iconic statue of the goddess Aphrodite?
Yes, the one that's renowned for its beauty and its embodiment of the golden ratio.
It's incredible to think that an island that witnessed such a dark chapter in history could also be the source of such a, timeless masterpiece of art.
It is. And that duality, that tension between power and beauty, between brutality and idealism, that's something that runs throughout the entire Peloponnesian War.
Wow. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll dive even deeper into the events of the Peloponnesian War and explore its lasting legacy.
Sounds good. It makes you wonder what stories those ancient stones could tell if they could only speak.
Right. It must have been something else to see that statue emerge from the ruins, after all those centuries. But you mentioned the Sicilian expedition, the one that Alcibiades pushed for.
Yeah.
That didn't go so well for Athens, did it?
No, it didn't. It turned into a complete disaster. The Athenian fleet ended up trapped in the harbor at Syracuse.
Oh, wow.
And after this prolonged siege, they were just utterly defeated. It was a major blow to Athenian power and morale.
So this was like a major turning point in the war. I mean, this defeat must have had ripple effects, throughout the entire Greek world.
Absolutely. I mean, Sparta sensed an opportunity and they stepped up their efforts.
Right. And you had other city-states that had been hesitant to challenge Athenian power.
Right.
But they started to see a chance to break free.
Yeah. So the tide had turned against Athens, but they didn't give up immediately, did they?
Not at all. They fought on for several more years, but their resources were dwindling and their leadership was fractured.
Yeah.
You had internal power struggles, coups, and even a brief period where Athens was actually ruled by an oligarchy instead of a democracy.
It sounds like things were falling apart on multiple fronts. I mean, military setbacks, political turmoil,
Right.
a loss of faith in their leaders.
Yeah, it was a very difficult time for the Athenians.
So how did it all end? What was it like the final nail in the coffin?
The final blow came in 405 BCE at the Battle of Aegospotami. The Athenian fleet was caught completely off guard by the Spartans,
Wow.
and they were decisively defeated. This defeat effectively gave Sparta control of the agency, which cut off Athens' supply lines,
Right.
and really crippled their ability to wage war.
So after years of conflict, it was a single battle that just sealed their fate. In a way, yes. The Battle of Aegospotami marked the end of Athenian naval supremacy, and it left them extremely vulnerable to a Spartan siege.
I can only imagine the feeling in Athens when news of this defeat reached them.
Right.
Their city, once a dominant force in the region, now completely at the mercy of their enemy.
It must have been a devastating blow. You know, they had lost so much their power, their influence, thousands of their citizens.
So what did Sparta do? Did they sack Athens? Did they burn it to the ground?
No, they didn't. They imposed harsh terms, but they didn't destroy the city.
Okay.
Athens was forced to tear down its long walls, surrender its fleet, and become a Spartan ally. Their empire was shattered, and their days of glory were over.
That is a tragic end to a once great power.
Hmm.
So looking back, what are some of the key takeaways from this conflict? What lessons can we learn from the Peloponnesian War?
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways is that even the most powerful empires are not invincible.
Yeah.
You know, hubris, strategic miscalculations, internal divisions,
Yeah.
all of these things can contribute to a nation's downfall.
It's a cautionary tale about overreach and the importance of, unity and wise leadership.
Exactly. The Peloponnesian War also highlights the cyclical nature of power.
Okay.
Athens' rise was meteoric, but their fall was equally swift. It shows that power is fluid and that fortunes can change very rapidly in the realm of international relations.
And then, of course, there's the enduring power of ideas.
Right.
I mean, Thucydides' account of the war, especially the Melian Dialogue.
Yeah.
I mean, people are still studying and debating those ideas today.
Absolutely. It raises timeless questions about the relationship between power and morality,
Right.
the nature of justice, the complexities of international relations.
Yeah, and let's not forget the connection to art.
Yes.
The Venus de Milo discovered on the island of Melos centuries after the war.
Right.
It's like a reminder that even in the midst of destruction, beauty and creativity can endure.
It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of art to transcend time and tragedy.
So what does all of this mean for us today? How can we apply the lessons of the Peloponnesian War to our own lives and the world around us?
I think one of the most important lessons is the need for humility and foresight in our actions, both individually and as a society. We need to be aware of the potential consequences of our choices
Right.
and strive to act with wisdom and compassion, even in the face of adversity.
That's a powerful message. And, we've seen how quickly things can change,
Right.
how easily conflict can erupt, how important it is to learn from the mistakes of the past.
History may not repeat itself exactly, but it often rhymes. By studying the Peloponnesian War, we can gain a deeper understanding of the forces that shape our world and the challenges that we face as a global community.
So before we wrap up this deep dive into the Peloponnesian War,
Yeah.
I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
You said that the Venus de Milo embodies the golden ratio.
I did.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So the golden ratio, often represented by the Greek letter phi, is an irrational number approximately equal to 1.618.
Yeah.
And it's found throughout nature.
Oh, really?
Yeah. From the spiral patterns of seashells to the arrangement of seeds in a sunflower.
Wow. So it's like this mathematical principle that seems to underlie beauty and harmony in the natural world.
Exactly. And artists and architects have been using the golden ratio for centuries to create aesthetically pleasing proportions in their works.
Oh, wow.
And the Venus de Milo is a classic example. The ratio of her height to the height of her navel is very close to the golden ratio, as is the ratio of the width of her shoulders to the width of her hips.
That's amazing to think that a mathematical concept can be so closely linked to our perception of beauty.
It is quite remarkable. The golden ratio suggests that there's this underlying order and harmony to the universe,
Right.
a kind of mathematical elegance that we find instinctively appealing.
So it's like beauty itself is rooted in this mathematical code.
Right.
Maybe that's why the Venus de Milo is still so captivating to us, even after all these centuries.
Perhaps. But, even if we don't fully understand the science behind it, we can still appreciate the beauty of the Venus de Milo and countless other works of art that have been inspired by the golden ratio.
It's interesting to think about this statue. This embodiment of beauty and harmony
Right.
was discovered on an island that witnessed so much brutality and conflict. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, art and beauty can emerge.
It really speaks to the enduring power of the human spirit. Even in the face of unimaginable suffering, we have the capacity to create beauty, to seek meaning, and to find hope.
And that is a perfect note to end on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the Peloponnesian War. It's been an incredible journey. That connection between the Venus de Milo and the island of Melos, it's really sticking with me. It's like this powerful symbol of resilience,
Right.
the enduring human spirit.
It is remarkable to think that something so beautiful could emerge from a place that had experienced such tragedy.
Yeah,
It speaks to the complexities of human nature, I think.
definitely. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Peloponnesian War, what are some of the key figures that stand out to you? Who really left their mark on this period?
Well, I think we have to start with Pericles.
Of course.
His impact on Athenian democracy is undeniable. And his Funeral Oration, it's still studied today as this model of leadership and rhetoric. But it's also important to remember that his vision of Athenian greatness had its limits.
Right.
And his strategy for the war ultimately contributed to that devastating plague.
And then there's Cleon. He really seems like a polarizing figure.
He does.
On the one hand, he really appealed to the people's desire for victory.
Right.
But his aggressive tactics ultimately led to setbacks for Athens.
I think Cleon really represents the dangers of populism and the allure of simple solutions to complex problems.
Right.
He was a skilled orator, but he lacked the strategic vision and the temperament of a true leader.
And of course, we can't forget Alcibiades, the brilliant but reckless strategist who pushed for the Sicilian expedition.
Oh, yes.
Mm.
His ambition and charisma were undeniable. But his gamble was ultimately disastrous and had far-reaching consequences for Athens.
So we have these three very different leaders, each representing kind of a different approach to leadership.
Right.
And each contributing to the course of the war in their own way.
Right.
What can we learn from them? What makes a good leader, especially in times of crisis?
That is a question that has been debated for centuries.
Right.
I think looking at these examples, we can see that a good leader needs a balance of vision, pragmatism, and integrity.
Okay.
They need the ability to inspire and unite people, but also the wisdom to make difficult choices
Right.
and the courage to stand by those choices even when they're unpopular.
It sounds like a tall order, especially in the midst of a conflict as complex and brutal as the Peloponnesian War.
It is.
Yeah.
But studying these historical figures with all their flaws and contradictions can offer some valuable insights into the challenges of leadership and the enduring human struggle for power.
So beyond leadership, what are some of the broader lessons we can take away from this deep dive into the Peloponnesian War? What resonates with you the most?
I think for me, it's the reminder that even the most powerful civilizations are vulnerable to decline and fall.
Okay.
Hubris, internal divisions, strategic miscalculations.
Right.
All of these things can contribute to the unraveling of even the mightiest empires.
It's a sobering thought. I mean, the Athenian Empire, once so dominant and influential,
Right.
ultimately crumbles from within and from without.
Exactly. And it really underscores the importance of humility, foresight, and adaptability. We must be willing to learn from our mistakes, to adjust our course when necessary,
Right.
and to recognize that the pursuit of power without wisdom and compassion is a recipe for disaster.
That is a powerful lesson, and one that feels especially relevant in our own time. We've seen how quickly things can change on the world stage,
Right.
how easily conflict can arise, and how important it is to strive for understanding and cooperation.
Precisely. The Peloponnesian War, despite its ancient setting, offers timeless insights into the dynamics of power, the complexities of conflict,
Right.
and the enduring challenges of human nature.
Well, this has been an incredibly enlightening deep dive, I think.
It has.
We've explored the political and military strategies, the philosophical debates, the artistic legacy,
Right.
and the human stories behind this pivotal moment in history.
And as we've seen, the echoes of the Peloponnesian War can still be felt today. From the debates about power and morality and international relations to the timeless allure of ancient Greek art,
Right.
the lessons of this conflict continue to resonate.
So as we wrap up, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this conversation?
I hope our listeners will come away with a deeper appreciation for the complexities of history and the enduring relevance of its lessons. The Peloponnesian War reminds us that human nature, with all its triumphs and failings, remains remarkably consistent across time. By studying the past, we can gain a better understanding of ourselves and the world around us, and perhaps make wiser choices for the future.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Peloponnesian War.
Yeah.
It's been a fascinating journey through time filled with intrigue, tragedy, and enduring lessons for us all.